Hello, I am your host, Tracy Otsuka. Thank you so much for joining me here for another episode of ADHD for Smartass Women. You know what my purpose is, right? It is always to show you who you are and then inspire you to be it. And in the thousands of ADHD women that I've had the privilege of meeting, I've never met not one, that wasn't truly brilliant at something. And so, of course, I am just delighted to introduce you to my guest, Izzie Chea. Izzie runs a wildly successful virtual piano studio teaching tens of thousands on YouTube. Her background is a perfect blend of passion and expertise. She has a bachelor's in psychology and human development from the University of Houston and a master's in industrial organizational psychology from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. But in true ADHD fashion, that is just the beginning. Izzie is a powerhouse entrepreneur, thought leader, and advocate for mental health and neurodivergence. Her initiatives center on providing resources, creating a sense of community, and amplifying neurodivergent voices, particularly with Latinx communities. With a decade of experience in music education, global community building, and leadership development, Izzie also holds certifications in workplace diversity and inclusive leadership. And she also runs an accountability membership program called the Accountable Otters Club. She manages social media and customer experience for the Hickey app. I hope I've pronounced that correctly, and owns a social media management agency, Neuropicante, all while balancing life in Houston, Texas, with her husband, Matt, and their two sons. She's a coffee addict, a cat lover, and never says no to pan dulce. Welcome, Izzie. Did I get all of that right?
Yeah, everything except the Hiki app. Hiki, it rhymes with tiki.
Cheeky. Okay, so I asked Izzie, okay, is it Chea? What is it? She's like, think Chia Pet. And now Hiki rhymes with Tiki.
Tiki.
Hiki. I went and looked at that app. It's fascinating, actually.
Yeah, it's like a cross between a dating app and a friendship app and a social media app. It's really, really great. Carved out a really interesting space in the internet world today, and we're growing tremendously. I think we are boasting over 220,000 members at this time. So I can't wait for the future.
I have a friend, Carolyn McGuire. She is probably the expert in relationships for neurodivergent kids and adults. And she wrote the book, Why Will No One Play With Me? And she's writing a new book now. And I'm really curious if she knows about the Hiki app. And is it just for adults, or is there also a part for kids?
It's just for adults at this time. In the future, we have some big dreams in the future to develop a neurodivergent app for teens, 13 to
Uh-huh.
17. So that's
Yeah.
that's in the far plans, but basing off of the knowledge and all of the experience that we've had building this platform for adults, we'll have a lot of great insight into developing that app for teens when the time comes.
That's great because all we need is one person, right, who understands us and makes us
Right,
feel like, okay, we're just fine the way we are.
right,
So I
right.
love that. Okay,
Yeah.
so I always want to talk about our guests' ADHD diagnoses first. So can you talk to us? Can you share with us what were the circumstances?
Absolutely. I'd be happy to share that. It kind of starts for me at the beginning of the pandemic. I, like many others out there, was thrown for a loop when the world shut down, and I had to transform my in person piano studio into something that could be viable during a global pandemic. So I took my entire studio and teaching philosophy and personality online, and sure enough, it resonated wildly with piano learners across the globe. And as a result of that, I took on a lot of extra work. I was recording something like 7 piano lesson videos every week. I was teaching to tens of thousands of users online. And I had a private piano studio of up to 50 students. It was almost every week because some of them were bi-weekly students. But I basically was working myself into the ground. And I was very much in survival mode, like so many of us during that time. My kids were home from school. I had to
Oh,
homeschool them. My eldest at the time, his second semester of kinder was when the shutdown happened. And my youngest was 3. So it was a really challenging time for me. But after a year of scraping by with this ridiculous schedule that I gave myself, I hit the classic neurodivergent burnout. Of course, at
Mhm.
the time, I didn't know it was neurodivergent burnout. And I just hit my rock bottom. So in the summer of 2021, I reached out to my healthcare provider and I just said that I was struggling so much, I needed help. Initially, I thought it was mainly depressed. I was depressed or really anxious and whatnot. So my primary care provider treated that first, the anxiety and depression. Now, again, there's a bunch of like stigma with taking mental health medication. And in my culture, the Latin culture, that's like a huge thing. So I had to get over my own internalized stigma to
Mhm.
even get to the point where I was okay with taking the medicine. So once I finally did start taking it and realized that it was doing nothing for me, after 6 weeks, I called my healthcare provider again and I said, am I doing something wrong here? Because I am more anxious, struggling more than ever.
Worse, not better.
It did. It made it
Mm.
worse because it wasn't fixing the root problem. So my healthcare provider ran a short battery of exams, tests. She realized that I may be suffering with ADHD, but since she was not a specialist, she wanted to make sure to refer me to somebody that was. So she went ahead and sent me a referral to an ADHD specialist.
Can I
Mhm.
ask you, were you like, what? ADHD?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It was very like out of left field for me. I didn't understand like where that even came from. I had seen a couple things on Instagram and TikTok, but I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. I didn't think that it was what I was dealing with. So I wouldn't say that I was one of the diagnoses that started understanding things on TikTok first.
Mhm.
It was more introduced to me by my doctor,
Mhm.
not knowing what the heck this was, and then going to social media and saying, where did this even come from? So after I got to see my ADHD specialist, I was in fact diagnosed with ADHD inattentive type,
Mhm.
and I began medication and treatment for that. And lo and behold, 6 weeks into taking medication for ADHD, my problems started to be better. They were improving. The fog was lifting in my brain. I could understand my priorities better. I wasn't so agitated and nervous and
Mhm.
anxious about things. And it, to me, it very much shows that so many women can be misdiagnosed with
Mhm.
depression and anxiety and be treated for these things without ever really understanding the root cause of those things, right? So, once I was able to understand that it was the ADHD that was causing me to be anxious and subsequently depressed because I was dealing with so much, then it started to melt away, right? The understanding was there, the clarity was there. It just helped me in learning how to accept the diagnosis and beginning to start the story of who I was now as an openly neurodivergent woman. So it's been a ride.
So although the story is a similar story, right? We
Yeah.
hear it all the time.
Hmm.
So I'm curious, when you took the medication, you were
Hmm.
not one of these people who right away it was like a light switch and oh my gosh, like all the noise is calmed down. I can think clearly. I can focus on one thing at a time. It took a while
Uh,
for you for the medication to kind of work.
I would say it was fairly quick when it
Mm.
did start to work, but finding the right dose took a little
Ah,
while. Yeah.
okay.
So, of course, and I'm on a non-stimulant,
Oh,
not
that's
a
why.
stimulant.
That's
Right.
why.
I was put on Strattera, and that was a conscious decision. mainly due to the anxiety that I do have, and
Yeah.
I have a history with eating disorders as well.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
didn't want to be put on a stimulant, and that
Yeah.
was something that was honored by my doctor, and she was able to help me navigate that because I know that that's important to have that say with the
Absolutely.
patient doctor relationship. Yeah,
It makes sense to
yeah,
me that, oh, well, that's why it took 6 weeks because Strattera does not happen overnight. It's not like taking a
yeah,
stimulant.
right,
Um,
exactly.
are you
And
still
it,
on it?
I am, yes.
For how many years now? Since 2022, you said, or 21, right?
21. Yeah, so
Okay.
officially this month, or actually it's October,
Uh-huh.
I hit my 3-year diagnosis anniversary, and I have been on Strattera the whole time, and it's been wonderful. You know, I know there's a lot to say about some people preferring stimulants over non-stimulants,
Sure.
but for what I was requesting from my doctor, my healthcare provider, and coupled with my history,
Hmm.
Strattera does the job for me, and it does work well. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Well, and I love hearing that because, what we often hear is, oh, it's the stimulants. Those are really the only ones that work. And I've heard from a lot of people who have tried the non stimulants. It's rare that I talk to someone and they tell me that, oh my gosh, this really made a difference for me. So I really like that you're the voice doing that because, again, it shows that our brains are all different and what works
Yeah.
for you may not work for me and vice versa, right?
Right. Absolutely. That's correct.
So, Izzy, I want to know, what were you like as a child?
Ooh. I was a very inquisitive, button pushing young Latina girl
Uh huh.
with loads of questions for people, and very, very curious. I wasn't what you would call, a disruptive child. I was
Hmm.
more the off in my own world
Hmm.
and very distracted and spacey type of girl. But once I got like really interested in something or down a line of questioning a person, I would go all the way, right? So probably I would be described as a little bit annoying of a child, but a lot of fun, but very distracted.
How'd you do in
So
school?
I actually did really well in school as
Hmm.
long as I had interest in the topic, right?
Mm.
So with an interest-based nervous system, I was very into music and arts and
Mm.
literature and certain sciences. I was not into math, and I was definitely not into any science that involved math. So
Yeah.
anything like chemistry or physics, it
Hmm.
was just like anything with numbers just did not work for me as a child. Now, I will say this. Um, Math started to make a lot more sense to me in college when I had a good teacher who
Okay.
understood that I required a different type of teaching, right? I needed a little bit more hand holding. I needed a lot different types of explaining things. And with that teacher, I was able to sort of turn it upside down for myself. Now I don't say that I'm bad at math. I just say, I just didn't have a good math teacher. But now that I did, I can say that, yeah, I'm pretty good at math now, which is
I
cool.
I love that because we start telling ourselves these stories. We're like Barbie, right? I hate math. And
Right.
I my entire life I was like I would study really hard. I'd get really good grades. Math was always my lowest grade, and I had
Hmm.
to study really hard for a B or a B plus. However,
Hmm.
and our audience has probably heard this story before, but I'm going to say it again because someone hasn't, and I want them to kind of change their thoughts around this. I got the highest grade in my trigonometry class. And for my entire life, I was like, how can you be bad at math? And first of all, I got B's. So it wasn't that I was really that bad, right? But I knew how hard I studied, given how uninterested I was.
Hmm.
And I always had that trigonometry grade out there. Like, how could you be bad at math and get like, that doesn't make sense. And so
Yeah.
when I was tested, my son was diagnosed with ADHD, which ultimately, got me to go get tested. And then in college, he discovered he was tested for dyslexia. And because I struggled so much to write my book, I thought, oh, well, if he has dyslexia, I must have dyslexia too. So I got retested this time for everything, including dyslexia. I do not have dyslexia. It's pretty much just, the ADHD of struggle of organizing my thoughts.
Hmm.
But what that test did, and I love it because it included standardized testing. So kind of like what you'd think of IQ testing. What it showed me is I am not bad at math at all. I'm actually quite good at math, but I had that thought my entire life
Yeah.
because of, frankly, crappy math teachers. Because when I
Yeah.
was little, so good at math. It wasn't until I think junior high school, it wasn't until high school, honestly. I remember
Hmm.
I had poor Mr. Wong, and I would sit in the back of the classroom screwing around. I remember curling my eyelashes, putting on, like I was a brat in a Catholic school. But I was so bored, I
Yeah.
hated that class and he just wasn't the teacher for me. But
Yeah.
because of that experience, I had been telling myself for decades, I'm like Barbie, I'm bad at math. And it's not true.
Right.
What about socially? How were you socially? Was that easy for you?
I would say it was kind of in between. I was blessed to be a part of a pretty vibrant, small Hispanic community
Hmm.
in my hometown, and my parents made it a point to attend, cultural events and through the church and through our own community center and things like that. So we had a pretty vibrant community that we did, participate in and make friends in. But I would say that my struggles with socially were whenever was at school. And, you're outside of that cultural friend group that you grow up with, right? Because everybody goes to different schools as part of that group. With me making friends in school, I felt like I didn't quite understand what it took to be part of that in group, right?
Mm.
So I would find myself, almost doing a little bit of social scripting and trying to like observe and then try different
Hmm.
phrases and things to try and like be a part of that in group. And sometimes it worked, but it didn't last for very long. And then many times it just did not work. So I took that as a sign that maybe I just wasn't that good at making friends. And I dove deep into my special interests. So
Mm.
into music, into reading, and just, existing and just trying to get through it, right? I was very focused on my grades and my music. So I did make a few good friends in my high school. Again, they were all motivated by similar interests.
Yeah.
We were all in the marching band. So, me on flute, my friends on one was a percussionist and the other was a clarinetist. Those were the girls that I hung out with. We also were all in choir too, so very music
Yes.
oriented. So those were my go-to friends in high school. So
So you
yeah,
found your people because I think so many
yeah,
of us, they look at the popular group, right? And
right.
I want to fit in there. I want to fit in with them. When in fact, they are not your people. And honestly,
Mm-mm.
if you'd go back and look at what are those popular girls, boys, whatever doing today versus what you're doing, it's probably very different.
Very, very different.
Yeah. They usually peak in
Um,
high school, right?
yeah, I didn't want to say it, but you can say it. It's like I would even say like so many neurodivergent women are late bloomers to
Yes.
say, it's not as bad as what, it feels like when we're in the thick of it, in our teen years where it's just like so incredibly hard. But once we've blossomed later in college and in early adulthood, then it starts to sort of you understand yourself better and you have that hindsight to look back and be like, okay, this could probably be done a little bit differently, and use that knowledge to forge your path forward that makes the most sense for you, right? Learning how to take what people say about you and just let it roll off your back, right? It's like learning these types of things that help you survive in those types of environments that may not be conducive to a neurodivergent woman growing up. So, you
Yeah.
know, like you said.
Well, and I think a lot of it is societal, right? Of how women are
Mhm.
supposed to be. And there are a lot of traits that we have with our ADHD, the impulsivity, the drivenness, you're clearly like so entrepreneurial, all these special interests. That is really not always valued in women. We're
Right.
supposed to just, sit to the side and nod and say yes when we're supposed to say yes and really not shine. And especially when you
Mhm.
think of women in general, it's this what we're socialized to do is never stand out. We're socialized to fit in, which
Right.
is exactly what was going on with that popular group. And so I suspect that a lot of those girls grow up never knowing who they really are because they're so concerned with fitting in and being perfect in a way that society deems is perfect for women or girls.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Yeah, it's
So
interesting.
go on.
It's interesting because in the Latin culture specifically, these are things that we encounter culturally
Mm-hmm.
quite a bit. We have a culture of machismo, which,
Yeah.
really leans into like the man being the head of the household, the man being in charge of everything,
Mm-hmm.
and the woman is the silent partner, right?
Yeah.
We're conditioned to uh, be quiet, keep a clean house, and raise, good children. There's a saying that happens in a lot of Latin families, is the calladita es más bonita. And calladita means the silent one, the silent, pretty one. That means that the quieter you are, the prettier you are. Yeah, calladita es más bonita. So it's these sorts of things that like are perpetuated in the Latin culture, and
Mm-hmm.
they're internalized as young girls and women. Is like they don't want you to make a scene, right?
Yeah.
Because that's another trope. That's another trope. The wild Latina, right? The one that
Yeah.
isn't. That's another one. And these are things that are very much perpetuated in our culture. And part of the advocacy work that I do with my page is to smash these stigmas and get rid of these like beliefs about who we are as a culture, and especially as neurodivergent women in the
Yeah.
Latin culture.
Who
We're
tend not to be
fighting a
very
lot.
silent.
Right, right, exactly. And that's sort of like where these things begin is like a neurodivergent Latina little girl is going to probably be or a thorn in your foot because she has a lot to say and she has no
Mm-hmm.
no qualms about saying it, right? If she
Yeah.
believes something, she's going to speak up about it. If she is feeling very strongly about something, you're going to hear about it, right? It's hard when it's like your own culture that is trying to snuff out those experiences, especially for young girls. Neurodivergence is not something that is talked about in Latin culture at all. Mhm.
Do they treat it like a religion, like they don't believe in it?
It's similar to that. I would say
Mhm.
some people will say like they don't believe it's a real thing, or maybe it's something to do with like you're being possessed by a devil or something or a demon.
Wow.
These things are perpetuated in our culture, right? And there's a lot to be said about that I, little by little I'm trying to chip away on my page. And yeah, a lot of it begins with conversations, having conversations with our parents and our elders, bringing these things up, bringing these conversations to light. Jorge is dealing with something related to autism, right? And, he perhaps is stimming loudly in during dinner or something. And, you're trying to get him to be quiet and not be himself, and then the family is complaining about it, like keep your kid silent type of thing. Like if there was a little more understanding about what autism is or what neurodivergence is in our culture, they would understand that he's probably expressing that he's loving the food. Right? Like loudly stimming is a sign,
Yeah.
can be a sign of happiness, of really
Uh-huh.
enjoying themselves. Same with, the types of experiences that young Latina girls have. They really, really want to express themselves and learn something new and tell you all about it. Like, let them talk to you. They're sharing something with you because they love you. They want to tell you these things, right? But telling them to be quiet, and that's literally
Shrink.
suppressing,
Hmm.
it's crushing the child, who is, so excited to tell you about something. Yes, their mouths may go 100 miles a minute, but let them express themselves, right? So
So, is this non belief in ADHD or autism, does that also include things like anxiety and depression and anything related to mental health? It's just kind of all kept in a basket with a lid?
I would say yes. So I'll go back a little bit. I'm a first generation Latina. My mother came here to this country in the 60s from the Dominican Republic.
Hmm.
My father grew up on the border, and a lot of times he likes to say that the border crossed him. um, as a Dominican Mexican American woman,
So, he grew
I
up on the border. Did he grow up on the American side of the border or the Mexican side?
the American side,
Okay.
but a 2-minute walk would get him
Oh,
to
okay.
across.
Okay.
He would go to breakfast at his grandmother's in Mexico, come across to school, and go back and play soccer.
Okay.
So it's just, it was a different time in the
Mhm.
1960s. Um, so that all that to say, um, it's it becomes part of assimilating to a new culture in the United States of America to keep your head down, fit
Yes,
in, work, make
absolutely.
things better for your children, right?
Yeah.
And anything that distracts from that is shunned or put away and not dealt with, right?
Hmm.
This is why a lot of us have generational trauma and things that have not been dealt with. Um, you know, we have a lot of people pleasing tendencies because it's been ingrained in our DNA to work hard and do everything we need to do to just get ahead, right? Because it's a matter of survival at that point, right? Assimilation in those times was survival into the dominant culture, right? And as we're exploring this now, I'm a parent now. I'm in the sandwich generation, right? I have my children and my elderly parents. It's a little bit different because, we see that we don't want to perpetuate these sort of like not talking about mental health and not talking about our neurodivergence to our children. I mean, my children are neurodivergent as well. And,
Hmm.
we talk about it openly. We learn about each other. We talk about our struggles. But we also talk about the solutions that we can give and the positives that our neurodivergence can bring. Whereas with my parents, a lot of it, you see the signs of the neurodivergence. I see it in my dad all the time, right? He's constantly, he's your classic workaholic, and he has to be doing something at all times, right? So
Hmm.
he's got that restlessness of an ADHD brain. We can see it. And that's okay, because that's what made him a successful
Yeah.
person, in the United States today. But talking about that openly is not quite as easy as it is with my children, right? So whenever I was expressing myself and telling them about my ADHD diagnosis, it was a little bit interesting, trying to navigate those conversations. So we started small. We had little talks here and there. And then gradually those conversations became them asking me a little more questions about it, which was a
Oh.
good sign.
Hmm.
And then keeping those conversations going, right, in environments where they are most comfortable, right? So family events, family gatherings, they're comfortable, they're sitting with the grandkids playing on the doing puzzles or something. And so those types of environments are conducive to deeper talks and more chances for connection. And that's, where I start to slip in those little conversations. And it really does help, right? Chipping slowly and slowly away at those stigmas within our own family and in our culture, it takes that amount of work, right? Little conversations here and there. And sure enough, you'll eventually get more buy-in and more understanding and more, desire to want to help support the special needs of a child that is neurodivergent as well. I see it, I see it in my own parents, the accommodating that they'll do for my kids and things like that. And it's really great. It's really great. So,
Yeah, that they would have never done for you. I love that.
right.
Oh, my mom, it was always like, well, why don't you let him do that? And I'm like, you would have never let me do that. But now she's the coolest grandma, right? So I'm
Right.
curious, have they really come around and how do they feel about what you're doing? And did it start out where they were just like, stop it, stop it. Why are you talking about these things?
In their age currently, they're at a point where they're okay with me talking about these things more openly, and then even going so far as to kind of apologizing for some of the things
Uh-huh.
that I dealt with, right? That's a really good sign. So I would say that, those conversations were not met, with negativity or force. It was more
Uh-huh.
like, oh, okay, and giving them the space and the
Mm-hmm.
time to
Mm-hmm.
process and really like understand why I would be bringing it up and why I am the way that I am. So I would say for me, it has been a fairly positive experience, right? Even those times where I think there was one conversation where I was very angry, right? Because when you get a new diagnosis as an adult, you go through the stages, right? First, it's like shock, right? And then it's grief, like of all the situations that you missed or the could haves, would haves, and should haves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's anger. You're at fault at this, right? And then you get the acceptance, right? So when I was in that anger stage, yeah, I confronted my parents about it. And I told them, like, my life could have been so different if you would have done this, right? Taken me to a real doctor and not the church. Taken me seriously,
Yeah.
right? Like these types of
Mm-hmm.
things. Um, and yeah, they received that.
Mm.
They understood and eventually apologized. I wasn't looking for an apology. I just wanted to express, right?
Yeah.
But apologized, and they're there for me now. Like they still love me. I still love them dearly.
Well,
you
and
know?
they did the best they could do. If they would have
Right.
had that information, they would have done different, right?
Exactly. Yeah, they did the best they could with what they had
Mm-hmm.
and the knowledge that they had at the time. I mean, it was the 90s. The early
Yeah.
90s. They didn't know, and they were
Well, doctors didn't know.
immigrants.
Why should they have known, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's another thing that I talk about too, in a lot of the talks that I give about being a Latina and neurodivergent is that, you know, have a little bit of grace for our elders and our parents because they really were doing the best that they could with what they had. Um, and they were trying to survive, especially if a lot of them were in the middle of assimilating into
Yeah.
United States culture.
And then their
So,
generational trauma, right? I mean, it
yeah,
all kind of gets stacked on top of each other.
exactly, exactly.
Okay, so what I wanted to ask you about, I'm sure we're going to get back to all of that in a second, but I don't want to forget. This is about your online piano studio, which just kills me. Like, how do you teach thousands of people online the piano? So I am curious, you had an in-person studio, COVID happened. How long did you panic before you're like, oh, I'm going to do an online studio? And you did it. Was it pretty quick?
Pretty quick. You know how our ADHD brains operate
Yeah.
when like crises are happening, right? So I just remember the address that the president gave on March 14th,
Mm,
2020, which was a Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And within 2 weeks, I had launched my online piano lessons. And I started, surprisingly enough, I started with them on Facebook,
Mm.
which was really like, who in their right mind is going to choose Facebook as the place that they launch their teaching? I don't
Had
know. I
you
just
had
did.
had you had any online experience at that point? Selling or delivering anything online? No. Okay. So it makes sense you would have tried Facebook first because that's where everybody seemed to
Yeah.
be. Well, I mean,
Yes.
YouTube too, but okay. So you tell me, so what was the difference? How long were you on Facebook? And what was the difference between being on Facebook and YouTube? And how do you do this? Like, what does this even look like?
Yeah. So I purchased I guess it's like a multi-cam streaming software, and I was able to have like two camera view, like an above the piano
Hmm.
and then a side view. And I was
Uh-huh.
able to record it onto my laptop. So once I did that, I uploaded the video to Facebook. Um, After seeing that my very, very first piano video did extremely well and was being shared by tens of thousands of people, I had one of my local students, because initially I had started all of this to give my local kids something to do when they're stuck at home.
Yeah.
So that was the motivation first, was to
Hmm.
give my kids something to do. So I did that, but then a lot of other people started watching them. And one of my local kids asked me, Miss Izzie, have you thought about putting this on YouTube? And I was like, no, but okay, let's try it. So I uploaded the first lesson onto YouTube, and by that time I had already recorded lessons 2 and 3 and 4. So I was like, okay, well, let me just put them all up there. And sure enough, I went viral, I guess, which is weird to say, but it was never my intention, but it just happened, right?
Uh-huh.
I knew that at that point, I could really make a difference for a lot of different people who are stuck at home, bored out of their skull, and
Uh-huh.
have a dusty piano in the corner from grandma,
Yeah.
who, need something to keep their kids off of them while they're on Zoom calls. It gives them something to do when they're stuck at home. So, I started with the kids, then I expanded to adults and teens, and I had multiple series going at once. I had little ones that I called my prep stars, my little ones. They're like 3 to 5. And then I had 6 to 11, and then 12 years all the way to adults. And I started from the very, very beginning. If they've never seen a piano before, all the way until later. And then on top of all that, I had a lot of adults who had learned piano as a child,
Mm-hmm.
abandoned it, and then wanted to come back, which was
Mm.
so cool. It was so cool to see that I was helping sort of rekindle like this passion that they had. Um, and they, telling me stories of memories of playing duets with their grandmother,
Uh-huh.
and, just like really heartfelt stuff that, like, oh gosh, I'm helping them like feel good about that again. So it was very motivating to want to create more and more lesson videos. And that's exactly what I did. My channel right now, I will come clean here. I haven't recorded a lesson video in probably a year and a half. And that
Uh-huh.
was because of the burnout that I experienced. But I have over 300 lesson videos on my channel that anybody can use right now. Go learn the piano, get your book, learn the piano, have fun. And I have like a virtual tip jar. If you want to drop a tip in there, that's fine too. If not, that's fine
So my husband started playing in his early 20s, and he bought, like, it was like a 9-foot grand piano. It was in his living room,
Wow.
and he played every day for 5 hours before his dad was like, if you want to be married to your piano, you can do this. But if you actually want to get married, you're going to have to get rid of that piano. But to this day, he talks about going back, because I mean, if you're in your early 20s spending 5 hours a day, clearly there was a passion there, right?
Oh
And he
yeah.
saw all the greats, like all the jazz pianists. He was like literally in the front row, sitting there, like watching their hands.
Wow.
So I need to send him to you. But that was the only way that you would get paid, was just the tip jar? You didn't have like
So
a subscription or anything like that?
I started a Patreon 3 months after I posted my first YouTube video.
Okay.
And again, it was still donation based. Like they could still
Yeah.
access everything for free. But I
Mhm.
had a lot of people who wanted to compensate me for my time. So I created different tiers that they
Uh-huh.
could join. And some of those tiers included things like voting privileges on the next song to learn
Uh-huh.
and stuff like that. And then I had additional series that were a patron only series. So
Mhm.
like if we were doing like a movie themes, you could get exclusive access to those, or Disney music, like you could get access to those, right? But from my Patreon, yes, I was able to I replaced my income from in-person lessons
Wow.
and doubled it within
Wow.
2 months of being on Patreon, which was fascinating and really exciting and also very
Yeah.
nerve-wracking.
Yeah. Oh my
So,
gosh. So you didn't even, and this was all on donations, just people who were grateful for the work that you were doing.
yes.
That's
Yeah.
great. So, okay. So then, and I love that all these different roles and all these different hats that you wear, because it is so ADHD. So,
Yes.
what was the motivation behind taking the role as head of social media and customer experience for Hiki? What was the motivation behind Hiki?
Yeah. So I joined the Hiki team, I guess it's been about 18 or 19 months ago.
Hmm.
And I actually joined the team as a result of my Instagram page growing so large,
Hmm.
as an ADHD advocacy page and, lived experience page. That was a decision to join the Hiki team, to sort of give myself a chance to be part of a team again, right?
Hmm.
So Hiki is a startup. We're a very small team of five, 5 people, and we work very closely with each other. But going from being a full-time entrepreneur for over a decade to joining a team, albeit a small team, right? It was a complete shift in how I operated, right? But I think it's been a positive experience overall because of really understanding the strengths that I bring to the team, right? There's certain things that I have such a uh, overarching idealist sort of view, very strategic, big thinking person. I'm able to really bring a lot of really interesting perspectives to the team. And that's been a really positive thing. We're all a neurodivergent team at Hiki too. Every single one of us is neurodivergent, whether that be ADHD, autistic, bipolar, all of us are some
Hmm.
flavor of something. And that makes for a really interesting experience because, you know, the way that the business is built is completely different than a neurotypical team, right? Our meetings are a lot more creative. We have a lot more discourse about things that we care about, right? But a lot of honoring the experiences that we all bring, to make the Hiki app as successful and as authentic as possible, right? And I feel like a lot of our users can sense that, right? The way that we've built the Hiki app is very different than you would experience something like Instagram or Snapchat or Hinge or Tinder, right? It's totally different the way that we've built this app. So it's quite cool.
Did the Hiki app come after the social media agency or social media management agency, or did it come before?
It actually came before. I started my social media agency, La Neuropicante, as a direct response to people emailing me and wanting help with their social media. They had seen my success online on my own page and my consistent driving new people and new followers and new business.
Mm-hmm.
And so many brands and people that work in different capacities, different industries, just sending me an email and saying, hey, do you do this for
Mm-hmm.
other people? And I never really of doing it for other people until I gave it a really big think. I sat down, I talked with my husband, and I said, look, people want me to do this for them. And I think I can get paid doing it.
So are you saying that what kind of led all this was actually the Neuropicante Instagram page? Was that where it started? Or was there another page that you were talking about, neurodivergence?
I had one page, but I have
Okay.
renamed it. Yeah.
Okay.
It started as Izzie and ADHD, and
Okay.
that was the page that went totally viral.
When
Yeah.
did that start?
That started November of 2021. So
So
about
pretty
8 weeks after my
it's
diagnosis.
so ADHD. Okay. And so what prompted you to start that page?
Again, it was one of those things where I never sought out to be a an influencer or a big page or anything. It just organically happened to catch on with people. I started it as a way for me to document
Mm,
learning about my neurodivergence, right? So
okay.
I would read something, I would read an article, and as a teacher, I would the best way to show that I've learned something is to make something about it, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I sort of treated it as an assignment to myself. I would make a video about it, talk about it, ask some questions, and then there we go. Like I learned something. And it turns out other people learned something too, and they caught on to my page. So,
Okay.
yes, in the first year of my page's existence, I went from 0 to 80,000 followers in the very first year, which is outrageous. um, and that was never the intention, like I said before.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
So then you changed the name of the page. Is that what happened? And
Yes.
about what, like a year in, or how long after?
I think it was 2 years in.
Okay.
2 years into having Izzy and ADHD, I
Uh-huh.
changed the name, and there were two reasons for that. The first reason was that I personally am obviously a multifaceted person,
Yeah.
and it was very difficult for me to express myself fully when I felt that the personal brand that I had given myself was so attached to a disorder label.
Ah.
So, and the second reason is that I am a Latina woman. And as a Latina woman, one of my main purposes is to bring awareness and smash stigma in my own community, right?
Love
So
that. Okay.
as I realized the platform that I had, I wanted to make sure that I was reaching the right people who could use my content and my information to help work towards that purpose, right? Bring awareness to the issues in the
Mm-hmm.
Latino community, right? Talk about neurodivergence, be a little spicy and fun and silly, but not always having my content be just about ADHD. It was very multifaceted, right?
Okay.
So I thought that the personal brand itself would be a very natural fit to change it to something like La Neuropicante, which in English is the neurospicy lady or
Yeah.
something, right? So it just felt right for me. And that's how it came about.
So your goal, again, as you moved, throughout this process, you discovered that, okay, well, wait, who really are my people? And how are my
Right.
people going to find my people? How are my people going to find me if I'm not being my people? Right? Basically.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So I love that name and I love how you say it versus how I say it. Um, so then came the Hiki app after that.
Yeah. So the Hiki app, I'm obviously still very active on my
Mhm.
Instagram page. That's my main
Yeah.
gig, right? The Hiki app is something that I do also that I feel very strongly about,
Okay.
and that I work with, but it's not my full-time gig, right? It's
Got
it's
it.
my part-time gig. Both of them are equally important to me. And I'm very happy that I have the privilege of being able to work on such an amazing team at Hiki. So,
Okay. And so then after Hiki, then the social media management agency? Is that kind of the trajectory?
kind of, yeah. I started that because of the emails that I was receiving,
Right.
right?
And that's what's really interesting about this because I think that's how a lot of people get into this area, right? Social media
Hmm.
management is they figure out that, oh, I can do this for myself and I really enjoy it. And then other people see what they're doing. It's like, well, I want some of that. So I'm
Right,
curious,
right.
with so many irons in the fire, how do you prioritize your projects or decide what to focus on each day?
That's a great question. I think the best way that I can prioritize my projects is just making sure that I am diligently using my calendar, and compartmentalizing my time really, really well. I give myself time boxes to work on my projects throughout the week. And I'm really stickler with my time, right? If I say I'm going to work on something for 2 hours, then I stick to that, right? If I say, this project is going to take 10 hours, then I will diligently work to make sure that I make those hours, right? So it's really important for me to be able to visually see everything that's going on, right? But then be able to work little by little on these different projects and feel accomplished working on them. When it starts to slip away, when the inevitable cancellations happen, or contracts need to be extended, or they're cut short, these things happen. Then going back again and looking at the big picture and seeing what it's almost like we have to be puppet masters to be able to like really fine tune all of those things that we're working on to make sure that the ripple effect from something big happening on this side isn't going to affect things on this side. So just being really, really good at visually seeing everything that I'm working on is how I'm able to prioritize. I know that's a very long-winded answer.
So, how do you visually see it? What kind of tools do you use to kind of organize your day?
I use Google Calendar religiously, and I color code all of my projects. I also track my hours on something called Toggle,
Hmm.
and those are all project based, and I'm able to manage all of my time on there. On the day to day, I use a tool called Llama Life, and that is a tool that is fantastic for laying out all of my tasks for the day. It's also really fun. They have confetti, they have like little icons and colors, and it's perfect for the ADHD brain. And it's something that I use every single day. They have a desktop app and they have a phone app called Llama Life,
Okay, I'm gonna have
and
to look that
it's
up.
it's really great. I have every single possible scenario of whatever day I might be having loaded into my Llama Life, and I just tap the day. It preloads my tasks and it starts the timer, right? And every time that I go through a task, there's a little blinking alarm. And then if I say I'm done, I hit done. Or if I need more time, it'll add time. So I'll keep doing that. I can also add in something, say something bigger, like make dinner, right? Something very plain. When I don't have the executive functioning or the energy to go through like laying out all my steps, they have something called a break it down tool
Ah,
where you can tap that and it's AI generated where it will break down a larger task into mini tasks. So if it's something like clean the bathroom, they will do it for you. They'll break it
wow.
down. And it's
Wow.
amazing. It's so helpful. Um, so yes, that's a tool that I use every single day. So
Okay, I am going to download that. That sounds fascinating. So, are there any small things that you now do every day to avoid feeling burned out or overwhelmed? Other than llama life, that sounds like a really good one.
I think a lot of it is just really understanding that it's okay to set the bar really low if you're having a low energy day
Mm-hmm.
and giving yourself permission to rest, right? If you have one of those days or, two of those days where you're just feeling like really really bad and or unmotivated or bored,
Yeah.
like giving ourselves permission to rest or permission to be creative or permission to go down that rabbit hole and like learn something. Like a lot of it, I feel there's so many things right now that is very shame based, right? Like you have these productivity apps that they'll nag at you, and you know it, it's very shame based type of productivity that
Yeah.
can really sort of eat away at us. And a lot of it can be really detrimental. Initially they may have the right motivations, but they don't quite understand how shame plays a part in it. It's important for us to, melt away the shame and, give ourselves permission for doing things the way that works best for you. If it's a low energy day, take the day to rest. If it's, you have high energy and you really, really, really want to, do a deep dive on a certain topic, give yourself permission to do it, right? That's like so important for our brains to get through that day-to-day mundane life. A lot of times we really really need to do that deep dive or
Yeah.
start researching something that you want for a business or a podcast or whatever. Like give yourself permission to do these things. I call those my creative sandbox times,
Uh-huh.
because it's important for us to be able to let our brains play, and give ourselves the space to understand that that's a very fulfilling part of being a human, is to express ourselves and to let our brains play. Yeah.
No, I love that. I mean, if what I always say is if you're not in positive emotion, you're struggling, right? So no
Mm-hmm.
matter what it is that you need to get done, even if it's something you really don't want to do, get yourself in positive emotion first, whatever that takes, and it's going to be so much easier to start. Okay, last question, Izzy. What are the ADHD traits that you feel are responsible for your success?
Oh goodness. Okay, so I would definitely say the relentless drive for creativity
Yeah.
is a big one for me. I would also say my ability to ideate
Hmm.
and come up with new big ideas that might be, outlandish for some, but could really, really make big differences. I would also say the drive to take the impulsivity and use it to your advantage. Sometimes those impulsive thoughts can get us in trouble. Like I'm guilty of it with, spending money and ending up in situations that I probably shouldn't have been in. But the impulsivity can be a blessing sometimes because it could be you asking a very interesting and outside the box question during a meeting. It
Hmm.
could be that totally out there idea that nobody ever thought about. It could be a spur of the moment idea for a last minute Halloween costume for a kid, right? But those impulsive ideas, just grabbing stuff and putting it together, and then it's like, this actually works. There's beauty in that, right? There really is beauty in that. So yes, I would say impulsivity. I would say drive for creativity and big picture thinking. So yeah.
Lovely. So, Izzie, are you working on something that you want to tell us about?
I'm always working on things.
I know.
So, yeah, I mean, there's always things that I'm working on. A lot of it right now, a lot of it is focusing on optimizing the Hiki app for our users. So I'm really enjoying, the new ideas that I bring to the table there. But also I have the idea floating around of perhaps doing a podcast in the future. It wouldn't necessarily be something that the world has heard before. I'm really taking that big picture thinking and trying to imagine it in the next level. So who knows? Maybe that'll be in my future. Luckily, I have Tracy as a great role model in this space. And others that really just trailblazing out there and doing amazing things. I also have my accountability club,
That's what I
and
was
that's
waiting for
always
you to talk
really
about.
fun. Yeah, so my accountability club is great. We have a lovely group of neurodivergent humans in our group where we work together on body doubling and accomplishing goals in the Accountable Otters Club. And that's a fun little club that we have there. We go live every day and work on things that otherwise we would probably ignore or put off to the last minute and make sure that we're making real progress towards our goals. So that's been really fun.
You go live every day?
Almost every day, yes. If it's
Is
not me hosting, then I have other hosts that go live too.
is it
Yeah,
the same time every day?
not the same time every day. So we have a host that really enjoys doing early morning. So
Mhm.
she goes live for her early birds session from
Uh-huh.
5 a.m. to 6 a.m. We have someone who likes to run study hall. So on Tuesday and Friday afternoons, he enjoys leading those sessions. I like to do one on Sunday called Sunday Chores, and we do all the catch up on chores together on Sundays. We have Monday morning kickstarts where we start our week with the right attitude and the right, just getting things done on Mondays.
Uh-huh.
What else do we do? Oh, we have night owls. We have another host who likes to do the night going live at night, and that's when a lot of members like to join in and do their catch up on their work and things like that. So it's a variety of times, and it's a lot of fun. We have a really dedicated group of folks that are in there. So
And that's called the Accountable Otters Club. Okay, where do they go to find more info about you and what you do? Where should we send them?
so you can find me at neuropicante.com, which will have links to basically all of my creative stuff that I do. And at the bottom, you'll find my Instagram. So you'll be able to find that too. And also, you can visit accotters.com, and that will take you to the Accountable Otters Club. You can learn more about our accountability club, read more about me, and join if you'd like to join our little club. We'd love to have you.
So, Izzie, thank you so much for spending time with us here today. It was such a pleasure to get to know you.
Yeah, it was wonderful. I had a great time, Tracy. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So that's what I have for you for this week. If you like this episode with Izzie, please let us know by leaving a review. You know what our goal is to change the conversation around ADHD, helping as many women as we possibly can learn how their ADHD brains work so that they too may discover their amazing strengths. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you here next week.